Good evening, everyone. Waiting for some of y'all to come on in here. Tap the screen, tap the screen, tap the screen, tap the screen, please. Please tap the screen. Wait for some of y'all to come on in here. Talk about what's going on in Houston. Wait, see if some more y'all come on in here. What the hell?
We are coming on the air cold and chaotic with an icy freeze and a bunch of snow messing up roads and flights and plans from the Midwest to the East Coast, where it's hitting hardest and when folks could catch a break from this early season Arctic blast. Plus, speaking of that travel misery, when things at the airport could get back to normal as lawmakers try to catch their flights back home to D.C. to get the government reopened. Then what's behind some of the dramatic images coming up?
Yeah, I thought she had something to talk about. Surely had nothing that much to talk about. Let me go ahead and get into this about what's going on in Houston. Here we go, y'all. Again, shout out to Law and Crime.
Never worry about your phone running out of battery when you're out and about. The secret is this compact device. Have you noticed that wealthy people in Shanghai never carry charging cable?
Is there, in fact, a bayou butcher haunting the streets of Houston, taking the lives of innocent people and leaving their bodies floating in waterways around Texas's largest city? Or is it merely a coincidence that dozens of people have ended up in the water in non-nefarious ways in a metro area of millions? That answer has now been complicated a bit by brand new information about the number of people found dead in Houston bayous over the last decade. We are breaking those stats down and what they may mean. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. As you're watching this, have you ever wondered how we're able to share so many clips from all of these stories so quickly? I'll give you a secret. If you're in the content creation game, it's called Opus Clip. This is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it a breeze to cut, create, and upload videos across any platform. Through AI, Opus Clip, it generates B-roll, reframes footage, and it even cleans up audio. It is so easy to use. You just visit opus.pro/sidebar, you sign up, you upload, and in minutes you will have perfectly edited clips ready to go for TikTok, Shorts, Reels. Opus is your one-stop shop. And having a tool like Opus Clip means our producers can get you viral courtroom updates instantly. At Sidebar, we want listeners to share their ideas too, and this is the most powerful tool there is to help you edit like a pro. Go to opus.pro/sidebar to create your videos today. New statistics that have been unearthed by investigative news teams in Houston, Texas, are shining a shocking spotlight once again on the bayous in the area and the number of bodies that have been pulled from the water in the last several years. And it is only fueling speculation that there may be a serial killer, a bayou butcher, stalking parts of Texas. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about this strange situation before here on Sidebar, that according to the Houston Police Department, between September 13th, 2024 and September 20th, 2025, officers responded to 39 incidents where bodies were found in different bayous around the area. Now, the causes of death were still pending for more than a dozen of those people. At least 11 had their causes listed as undetermined. That's according to police records that were provided to Houston Public Media. But in mid-September, there was a body that was discovered in Brays Bayou. And after several days, officials were able to make an identification. 21-year-old Jade McKissick, a University of Houston student. She'd gone missing after leaving a midtown bar. Police say she was last seen at a gas station buying a drink. She's seen leaving alone, the cameras lose her, and she wasn't seen again until her body was found. According to a news release from Houston PD, quote, an autopsy by the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences revealed no signs of trauma or foul play, and the cause of death is still under investigation. But McKissick wasn't the only person found in a body on September 15th. No, hours later that same day, the body of 43-year-old Rodney Chapman was found in Greens Bayou. His sister told Outlet
That's two
KHOU
bodies.
that her brother's body was shirtless. He was apparently wearing a pair of
Two
shorts.
bodies in the
One
same
sock was
day.
found. Next day, 24-year-old Seth Hansen's body was found in White Oak Bayou. September 18th.
Third body in
HPD
24
says
hours.
witnesses reported seeing someone jump into Buffalo Bayou and never resurface. That man was identified as 63-year-old Arnulfo Alvarado. Michael Rice, reported to be either 66 or 67, was found dead also in Buffalo Bayou
That's
on
5.
September 20th. A sixth person was found dead in almost as many days on September 25th. Michaela Miller's remains, they were identified after police asked for the public's help. They released a photo of a tattoo on her wrist. It was 3 8s. So in all, Houston police say 28 bodies, 28, have been recovered from bayous in the area this year alone. And that number...
Y'all heard that right. 28 bodies this year alone have been recovered from Houston bayous. But yet, the mayor of Houston and the city council, along with the police force, wants to sit here and try to tell you that Houston does not have a problem. Lies. Houston has a problem and they downplaying it.
Has really gotten people's attention, and this is why there have been rumors and speculation of a killing spree. That has been in the headlines ever since. In fact, authorities have had to address this. Houston Police, Mayor John Whitmire, they have repeatedly tried to reassure the public that there is no connection at all between the deaths. In fact, listen to what was said at a news conference back in September.
We do not have any evidence that there is a serial killer loose in Houston, Texas. Let me say that again. There is no evidence that there is a serial killer loose on the streets of Houston. If there was, you would have to me first.
There's no evidence, and I repeat, no evidence to suggest that any of these incidents are connected. In all of the 5 incidents, the medical examiner's office will determine the cause of death. The investigation into these incidents is pending the determination of the ME's office. For us as an agency, rumors stir fear and anxiety in our communities. It's important to rely on verified information and investigations.
She banks in China, so she's racking up cash back on everyday purchases.
Tap screen, please.
I'm
Please
Sora
tap
2,
screen.
the new AI in town.
We're not afraid.
It's important
Please
to
tap
rely
the
on
screen.
verified information and investigations.
But now we got to talk about these stats. These new stats that were uncovered by KPRC2, this is an NBC affiliate in Texas, they are shining new light on how many bodies went into the Harris County Medical Examiner's office after being found in Houston bayous. The news outlet requested information from the ME's office and received data. So what happened was the news outlet requested information from the medical examiner's office, and they receive all this data that goes back to January 2017. This is what we want to talk about. All right, so to help me break down these numbers, parse out what they really mean, I want to welcome back friend of the show, former CIA Special Operations Officer and FBI Special Agent, author of The Unexpected Spy, national security contributor for News Nation, so many titles. Tracy Walder joins us right now. Tracy, so good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. You know, you've been on to talk about these kinds of potential serial killer cases before. Just to be clear, with the fascination going into this, with so much attention being brought to this, we're about to talk about the stats too. What is your general theory of what's going on here?
I think the hard part, to be completely honest with you, is that about 2/3 of these don't have a manner of death, right? They have not declared how these people ultimately died and how they ended up in the bayou. And I think as a result of that, then public speculation comes out. And I also think when you have the police or Houston PD saying, I would say so emphatically, right, that this is not the work of a serial killer without a manner of death, it really starts to bring in people questioning a lot of this. And when you sort of have these clusters in just one bayou alone, right, you have 16. And so I think that's where this sort of starts to go into, is this really a work of a serial killer?
Yeah, and by the way, the difficulty of one or two people or three people committing all of these, just for argument's sake, speculation point of view, if they were responsible for multiple deaths, is that unusual in today's day and age for one or two or three people to be able to do that?
So, I mean, are you referring to almost like a group of serial killers, essentially?
Let's say one, or let's say, a small group. But, I mean, even one person, let's say there was one person who's able to kill all of these people. In your experience, today's day and age, would that be possible that somebody would be able to do that and not get caught?
I don't want to say impossible, obviously, because nothing's impossible, right, Jesse? But I think in one of these, you've got, 5 people ends up in a bayou within a span of, just 6 days. So obviously that's pretty quick. I do think also in this day and age, as you mentioned, with security cameras, all those kinds of things, to not spot someone is unusual. But again, I don't want to say that this is a non-issue. I do think because these bodies are ultimately found in water, forensic evidence on them is going to be very few and far between. So police officers, in terms of identifying, a perpetrator, would really be relying on evidence outside of the body in a case like this.
No, it's a really good point. And look, there's a number of factors to consider here. When they died, where they were found, the circumstances, they're different. But obviously there is a pattern here. So I want to take a look at some of these records that KPRC2 uncovered. So since the beginning of 2017, there have been 189 bodies found in the bayous. Think about that number, okay? So you can see from the numbers on your screen, 2024, 2025, those were the years when the most bodies were pulled from the water. 34 last year, 28 so far this year. This is according to records from the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office that KRPC2 reviewed. And when it comes to the causes of death, the office says that with the largest cause being listed...
Oh, sorry.
Death, the office says that with the largest cause being listed as undetermined at 39% or 75 deaths, 24% are listed as accidental drownings, 13% are situations where people had ended their own lives, 9% or 17 cases were homicides. So Tracy, what are your initial thoughts on those numbers?
It's hard. Obviously, I live in Texas, right? You've got a body of water, you've got humidity, and you have heat.
Here's the thing I don't understand. Why is the local government trying to downplay on what's really going on? That's the only problem I have. Is them downplaying everything that's going on. It don't make no sense for them to downplay on what's really going down. I just don't get it.
Have heat. And so I don't mean to be graphic, but I think it's going to be difficult in some of these cases to ultimately determine a cause of death. In terms of the cases that are homicide or individuals ending their own lives, that's information that they probably received from the family, right? Indicating that individual was going to take this line of action. And so I think that's what's going to be difficult is because of the way that these bodies were found and however long they were ultimately submerged in water. The remains in and of themselves, as I mentioned before, are just going to have almost no forensic evidence on them, and then that's going to be really hard to determine. And when you have that kind of ambiguous information out there, that can lead to a lot of speculation, and I totally understand why.
189 deaths. Does that feel like a lot to you?
Over that period of time, maybe not. But as you mentioned before, the 2004-5 time frame, that to me seems like a lot in the span.
2024, 2025, yeah.
Yes.
I know that different jurisdictions and offices may have different parameters or guidelines when they say something is undetermined. In general, though, if you're looking at that number of undetermined, does that automatically mean investigation's closed, we're not actively pursuing it anymore, we're going to look to other cases? If something should pop up, yeah, we'll listen to it, but what does that mean? I mean, does that mean case closed for those?
That doesn't mean case closed. It just makes it sometimes harder to investigate, right? So if it's not been declared a homicide, then that's not going to immediately levy the full force of the police and their investigatory skills at a case like that. If you can't initially determine that something is a homicide, right? I don't want to say they're going to close it and put it to the back burner and never think about it again, but they might try another way to try to investigate that cause of death. But because they can't, at this point in time, label it homicide, they do not have sort of the full power of the police investigating that.
And undetermined could potentially mean there was foul play. It's just not determined at this point. Could mean something else. But if you're bringing attention to this, do they have to create their own kind of task force? Do they bring in outside resources? Does the FBI get involved and say, listen, we're going to dedicate 6 months to looking into all these cases and trying to see if there's connective tissue? Do they have to?
They don't have to. That's the thing.
I mean, yeah.
If you want to be honest, I think it's in the public's best interest too, especially with that many undetermined. If you just had one or two, unfortunately, that had remained undetermined, I can maybe understand not bringing all of that and creating a task force. But when you have this many that are undetermined, I feel it could potentially create an issue where the public may or may not be safe, depending on what those causes of deaths are. And so I would think that you would want to create a task force to really try to pinpoint that, to determine ultimately what's at play here.
And according to the mayor, there are 2,500 miles of bayous in the Houston area. So it's not like there's just one small body of water where all these bodies keep being found. When you look at that, you talk about 189 bodies being found since 2017. I guess it makes a little bit more sense. You're talking about bodies of water. I'm not from Texas, but I guess that is something to consider here when we talk about it.
I mean, listen, Houston is essentially one big group of bayous, and I thought about that because you're right, 189. I'm not minimizing the death of any of these individuals, but when you have that many miles of bayou, yes, it's somewhat of a drop in the bucket. But when you start to look, that 16 were found in one of them. To me, that's a high cluster of numbers being found in just one of the bayous. And some of them you've got maybe one or two, but in one you've got 16, and in another one you have 9. And so in some of these, I think it would be in their best interest to look at where the clusters of these are and determine if there is something or not going on in these areas.
And I have a few more stats about the deceased in a minute, but just to generally speak, if you're seeing 1 death and 2 deaths and 3 deaths, law enforcement doesn't set up a perimeter around these bayous to see what's going on. I mean, that part struck me as strange, right? Shouldn't there be some level of surveillance to see what's going on in these areas?
Yes and no. They're doing that in Austin, obviously. They did that in the waterways there. They set up more cameras, more lights, those kinds of things. But to the issue of bayous, first of all, HPD is only so big, right, that they can be monitoring that. But in terms of the bayous themselves, they are so vast and there are so many of them. It probably would be in their best interest to put up more cameras. All of that costs money, so I don't know what their budgeting is. They can't necessarily just set up perimeters and sit on them because, again, we don't know when some of these clusters occurred. When was the first person who was found in it found, and then when was the last person pulled out? If that's over the span of the year and there's only 4 people, then you're going to be sitting on that bayou for 12 months, and that isn't necessarily feasible.
Let me go back to some of these stats. So a majority of the people that were found were men. 85%, this is according to the ME's office, 14% were female, and 1 set of remains was apparently too degraded to identify. Tracy, what do you make of that number? Does that surprise you?
Yeah, it does. And the reason it surprises me too is because you and I have talked about this, in other waterways in Austin, and then also in Chicago as well. Those have primarily also been men, very high percentages, so over 85%, sort of what you were mentioning here. And so, yeah, I think that that's interesting that we are dealing with primarily, overwhelmingly, one gender of individual.
Is there a difference in terms of death or an investigation when you're dealing with gender? I mean, if you're thinking about how did a majority of men die versus, let's say there was a majority of women die, does that change how investigators look at that? Does that change how these cases are approached in any way? Does it tell you something?
I personally have never approached a case differently, based on gender, really ever. But I do think when you have a high concentration, right, if you're looking at the work of a serial killer for patterns, those kinds of things, when you have multiple deaths, obviously that's a huge red flag in terms of the pattern when you have the overwhelmingly majority of them being male.
And you're also talking all different races, genders, ages. Going back to the idea of a serial killer, would it be atypical for a serial killer to do that?
To be specific, I'm sorry, Jesse, do you mean to be specific in terms of a gender or?
Yeah, like if you're talking about a potential serial killer, would they focus on one race, one gender, one age, or in your experience when looking at these people, they may not discriminate in terms of victims?
Most serial killers, I want to say all, but most, do discriminate in that they do have a target, right? A type of individual that they're looking for. Now, that discrimination can come in all different forms. It could be gender, it could be race, it could be religion, it could be so many different age, it could be so many different things. So yes, in a case like this where you do again see the overwhelming majority being male, then yes, I don't want to say every serial killer focuses on a type, but I would say 95% of serial killers does narrow it down to a type.
By the way, age, most are between the ages of 30 and 39 years of age. So you're talking about 47 deaths between that age group, 30 and 39. Anything we should be thinking about there?
Again, to what you had mentioned earlier, I also think that raises the possibility of a serial killer. Typically, when you have accidental deaths, those kinds of things, accidents don't discriminate. And you are going to have across the board men, women, ages, all those kinds of things. And so that, in a way, I guess concerns me that they're mostly male, over 85%, and then in between that age group does, I think, raise some alarms in terms of the types of individuals who are deceased.
Unsurprisingly, the lack of information is very frustrating for people. It's frustrating particularly for the family members. And when you look at the family member, for example, of 22-year-old Kenneth Cutting, who was found dead in Buffalo Bayou last year, his family spoke with KHOU last month. His father saying, I've been waiting for a year and a half now. He did not fall in that bayou. Somebody put him in that bayou. And according to Cutting Sr., his son's cause of death is still listed as undetermined, with WHAS 11 reporting that Houston police say the case has been closed, that they haven't found any evidence of a homicide. Cutting went on to say, I don't know if there's a serial killer, but the way they're dealing with these bodies is ridiculous. Tracy, what's your thought on that? What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think I understand where the family is coming from, and I think they still don't have that cause of death,
exactly,
right, for their loved one. And so then for the police to very quickly say, no, this is not the work of a serial killer, leads the family to believe that this is not fully being investigated. And I do think that the families deserve that. I do think that the decedents deserve that. And I think that's what's so surprising. As you mentioned, this lack of information, right, that's out there. And you're right, it is a lack of information. However, it's this lack of information, but this very quick reaction and statement by HPD that these are not the work of a serial killer.
Not even the work of a serial killer. They say it's not a homicide. They haven't found any evidence of a homicide. How do they determine that? And how do they determine that potentially so quickly? I don't know what the time frame was in terms of when they determined there was no evidence of a homicide, but how do you rule that out?
That's what I don't know how quickly they made that determination. I don't have access to that. They have not.
Right. Generally speaking.
Yeah. So it all, I don't want to get too graphic, but a lot of it's going to depend on the condition of the body, right? And how they found that, and how long that's going to take, and how long they're going to have, any types of a forensic analysis come back. You don't know, too, if they've done toxicology reports, how long that's going to take. My guess is they found no DNA on any of these bodies if they were submerged in water. Again, I'm just assuming. I don't know. And so all of that is going to take some time.
Tap screen, please.
Which is why
Please
I
tap
am so
screen.
surprised. They can take months, to be completely honest with you, Jesse, to get all of that information back, depending on how backlogged they are. I don't know how backlogged HPD is. And so that's why, again, I'm so surprised that they've just very quickly made that statement.
And I just want to get your opinion on this. There, I'm sure, is a theory out there that law enforcement is saying one thing, but they're believing another, right? They might be saying there's nothing to see here, there's no serial killer, there's no cause of alarm for the public, when in reality, law enforcement is thinking, uh-oh, there might be someone out there might be several people out there. I don't believe that's true, right? And I'm curious your perspective on that, because it seems to me if there really was a danger to the public, law enforcement would have a responsibility to share that information, and particularly because they would need the public. They would need the public for more information. There's someone on the loose. There's something happening. Be vigilant. Those who may believe that law enforcement is not 100% being transparent about what they're seeing, that maybe they're secretly investigating this, just what would be your response to that?
Yeah, I'm with you, Jesse. I do not believe the bottom line is law enforcement's job is public safety. It is to keep the public safe. And so
Yes, y'all can keep the public safe, but at the same time, don't be going around BSing the public. The public knows that something is going on. Now, I understand that y'all don't want to, quote unquote, incite a panic or whatever, but the public's not stupid. Tell the public basically what the F is going on. Let's get back into this.
bottom line is law enforcement's job is public safety. It is to keep the public safe. And so if there is a threat out there, and they do believe there's a threat out there, I understand not giving all of the information regarding that threat. If you need to catch them and all of that, you don't want to put all of that out there. But you do have a responsibility to let the public know, to be aware and to be vigilant. And so I don't believe that they may know a little bit more, but I don't believe that they are secretly kind of holding back that this is a serial killer, because it is their job to protect the public. That is their number one job.
Tracy Walder, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar.
And that's it. I hope y'all enjoyed this little tidbit of information. Stay safe. Keep your head on a swivel. Walk in pairs. I'll see y'all later. Peace.